Let's roll. This is Countercharge, your podcast for ranks, flanks, and kings of war. Join your hosts as they delve into the world of Panithor and bring you worldwide coverage of all things Kings of War.
Welcome to Countercharge. I'm Rob Fanoff.
I'm Matt Croger.
And I am Jeremy Duvall. Welcome. We're back again for another Fireside Chat, our February edition. Happy to have Rob and Matt on the show. Got a bunch of cool stuff to talk about today. Great community question. But as with all firesides, we like to do a quick around the table community / life update. What have you been up to, Rob?
For me, it's Blue City Brawl 100% of all free time. And we'll talk a little bit about that in the hobby section. But the Blue City Brawl is the first weekend of March. It's a doubles event. I love it. I paired up with Dan Kemick for the second year. We're having a blast. I think people are going to be surprised by what we've done. Adepticon registration is open. Don't forget, get out there, get signed up. There's only 3 spots left for the pairings event. There's only 6 spots left for Adeptic Clash. There's 7 spots left for Firefight, 12 spots for Armada. I think Armada is a little slow because it's paired up against some other stuff. And I think it doesn't have as many people this year, which is unfortunate. And if you're into Dead Zone, it's already full. But get signed up as quickly as you can, because as soon as these events do fill up, they're going to try and expand the event. And then we do have Kings of Memphis 5 coming up June 21st through 22nd, 2025. As a reminder, it's 2,025 points. I know it's a weird number. I like weird. It's new player friendly. It's got a free Bard character. We are using command dice. We're not using allies or withdraw. And registration is now open, and a link to registration and the player pack are in the show notes. I mean, you must not be doing anything now. You're sort of decompressing, right, after Clash of Kings, Matt?
Yes, I am decompressing. So not really thinking about tournaments much at all, except to think about what we might be able to do in terms of an app that runs tournaments decently, because, you know, the second year in a row, when it came to hobby scores, Companions screwed me in the bum, you know, despite years and years of feedback. So that was a bit frustrating, but we had a great event.
How did our American do over there?
Not well. So going into day 2, Mr. Cox was on the bottom table. But he was having a great time, brought me some amazing Texan pickle beers. So I was enjoying those with a Mexican wrap at lunchtimes, and he was great fun to have around, and I hope he had a great time. We've got a little clip of him when the episode comes out from partway through the first day, I think it was, or maybe the start of the second day. And, you know, in Mark's defense, being on the bottom table, I don't think he was running a typical list. It was, had to get on the plane. And then we had a few people turn up who weren't from inside Kings to trial some games on the 2 nights. Bit playing Halo, plenty of guys tried other things, like there was about 8 people playing the Worms board game who looked like they were having a great time. So all in all, a great event, and I have it on good authority that there's a very good chance that we'll have Mr. Renton back next year with us. I have a feeling it happens to time with a significant birthday of one of his friends that's in Australia, so there's good reasons for him to come. Yeah, looking forward to that. So now just everything turns towards, you know, what tournaments do we run for this year, and try and build things up a bit. What about yourself, Jeremy? What's happening in J-Land?
So lots of stuff. Been pretty busy. End of January, Jeff Swan and I went to LVO, which was pretty fun, to play an MCP / hang out in Vegas. That was a fun event, very much kind of like mini Adepticon, in that they had a vendor hall, lots of events, you know, very GW heavy. But they did have Conquest had a booth there. They were playing, like, they had a War Machine Hordes tournament, plus all the Atomic Mass game stuff like MCP, like I said, but plus they had Shatterpoint. And so I definitely think there is a space there to do a Kings of War event. And we've talked in the past about maybe copying Crossroads and running a team style event, which we think would do pretty well in Vegas, right? You get together with your buddies, come out to Vegas and play in a team style event. So I think once we get through hosting Masters, that might be those sort of the next big community building thing we try to plan, because I don't actually have a tournament that I run I have support everyone else's tournaments, but I don't have my tournament, right? Like Matt, you got Clash, Rob has his Memphis tournament. I don't have a tournament that I have full agency over. The Vegas team tournament might be one that I do, but still in the works.
I would love to workshop names on that, coming stuff up with around Jeremy and his
Totally.
personality. How good would that be? You could get an awesome tournament name for
The
something.
Golden Buddha or something.
Yeah, I think we could have a really fun event, that style event. And I think just that style of event, because often we say Vegas is its own animal, right, as far as what tournaments work there. But I think a team tournament where you go on a trip to Vegas with your buddies, I just think it's a nice organic connection there. So I've in the past tried to reach out to a Frontline, but I've, had difficulties in regards to getting connected with their leadership. And with Masters this year, we don't have the bandwidth to start from scratch a brand new event. So definitely something that's on the vision board, but for down the road, as we are really focusing on Masters. So right now, we issued our first issue of the Masters Minute, which is our monthly newsletter about all things Masters. We're doing one both for the player focused and also region chair focused. So the first one came out. It should be posted in our Facebook group and all of your Facebook region Facebooks. I got to put it on the Masters website, but essentially it covers the codes for hotels, all the airport information, all the travel logistics. Everything's in there. So our next issue, which is going to be coming out towards the end of February, we're going to be covering food choices and other things to do in Reno. And then we're also going to have all our logistical information around how do you sign up, right? Because there's that key to Masters, right? You don't know if you're going to make the Masters team. So we're going to have some structure around if you want to sign up for Best of the Rest, knowing if you don't make the Masters team, you're going to come to Best of the Rest, just so the players can start making their logistical plans, getting signed up, all that stuff. So that's going to be in the next issue. And then in future issues, we'll be highlighting some of our prize support, some of the other special features we have planned for Masters. As you guys have seen, I've started to get the prize swag in, and it's looking really awesome. Very excited about what we have to offer. We're definitely under the philosophy of we're spending our resources not around boxed prize support. We will have a prize support raffle around that stuff, but we're spending a lot of our resources on swag. Which I think is really what you want when you go to. I mean, what do you guys think when you go to this type of event?
Yeah, I want stuff that I can't get anywhere else. I don't need to buy. I don't need you to give me models.
I think particularly for something like the Masters, right? I think at regular tournaments, you might have people that turn up to their one event for the year or something like that. And I think models and things are really good for that. But, something that's special for stuff like that is great. And I think your idea around making sure people can sign up early if they intend to go in some form is really good too. Like we had that this year where the guys set up, basically the ticket was the ticket. And so that would get you into either event. So I think that's a really good idea too, mate.
Yeah, we really wanted to take from the Mid-Atlantic Masters what worked well for them and build upon that. So that idea of being able to logistically have a clear idea on how much this thing's cost, when can I sign up, all of that support, we really want that process to be seamless. And then also during the day of, we're going to have different committee members who are in charge of different things. For example, we'll have like a local liaison. So you'll have your go-to person for anything related to food or beverage. You'll have a guy, a rules tournament committee guy to go to. You'll have for any, and we'll be introducing all those people and their roles within the Masters minutes, just so that people can stay connected to the process, see the prizes, see the all the the stuff that we're working on, and know that we're really taking this Masters as seriously. We really want to do an amazing event. So that's been really good. Right now, all the chairs are voting around all of the stuff that chairs voting on, such as we're looking at confirming points, tournament pack. Are we going to use command dice? Are we not going to use command dice? Are we using the withdraw? Are we not using the withdraw? For Masters in the US, those are always voted by the chairs so that they can talk to their local communities. So all those votes are happening right now. So that will be released when we release the pack. So stay tuned for all that information. But yeah, and I just keep saying, man, if you've ever wanted to come to a Masters, but you're not sure that you are going to qualify, or you kind of been on the fence, come. this year. We have plenty of space. It's going to be a fantastic event. Best of the Rest is going to be killer. Masters itself is going to be great. The Atlanta Casino is a great hotel. There's tons of awesome food nearby. It's easy to get to. So definitely think about coming for that. Sooner on the radar is on the weekend of the 15th and 16th, President's Day weekend. Every year we have the Riddle of Steel, which is our Conan-themed event that takes place at the Chateau de Holcomb, as I call it, Scott Holcomb's house in Orange County. That is just around the corner, and we have people coming in from Texas, from the Pacific Northwest. Last year, we had some Canada guys come all the way down for it. So that shows you how cool a tournament is when you have people coming from Canada to some guy's house, you know. Definitely the West Coast version of Vanguard, of Michael Adkins' home tournament. So that's happening next weekend. As we record this, really excited for that. Riddle of Steel is so much fun. I'm taking the Basileans, but I'm taking a little bit of a different look. I'm taking what I took the Master, so I have the Sisterhood Infantry Horde, which is a new piece. And then I've been running my 2 knight regiments. I've been running them as a horde. So with the Sisterhood Infantry Horde, the Knight Regiment Horde, and 2 hordes of Palace Guard Ogres, I have 4 hammers with some speed and healing to support that. And that list has been pretty fun to play. I've been enjoying playing that variation.
I reckon Bag of Hammers works with
Vasalia.
Yeah, it means that when you do get in there and you have okay dice, you make sure you kill stuff. Because the thing with Basalia, if you bounce, you're dead, right? Whereas now I've just doubled down on that, because the knight regiments themselves, unless you're charging with Elohi support or some other support, they're really not going to pick anything up. So I just put them in a horde. Bob's your uncle. They can survive some shooting now. They can take a counterpunch and still live. So, and then the Sisterhood Infantry is probably my favorite unit in the whole list now. It's just so tasty.
I'm still finding, because I took it to an event over Christmas, just a casual event, and people are still caught out by the Rampage 10. It's glorious.
Yeah, and I run mine with Proof Sharpness, so it makes them like So yeah, you charge in something, and they're like, okay, I'm rolling. I got 40 attacks on, and then I got Vicious, and they're like, excuse me, what? And I'm like, oh yeah, these ladies are angry. So, and I run it with bark skin support, so to try to help protect them as they're trying to get into combat. But yeah, so it's super fun. A lot on the radar here as we get out of winter and start to transition into spring. A lot of events, and then it's just like Masters prep. What about hobby wise, Rob? What have you been up to? I know you've been working on an awesome secret project for BCB. Like, what have you been up to?
Blue Sea Brawl Army. It's a doubles event, so I'm paying 1,000 points and Dan's paying 1,000 points, and then we've got display boards and basing and all that stuff. Been working on that a ton, and I still have 3 weekends left until the event. I've used oil paints for the first time, and it's pretty awesome. It's a different animal because it's not additive, like where you just keep layering on. With oil paints, you put the 2 colors on and you blend them together and you move on, and then you wait 2 weeks for it to dry. So that's been interesting learning. That's been an interesting learning experience. The basing, it's insane. It's something I would never do normally, but we wanted to try something super different, so we did it, and it's coming out pretty cool. After Blue Sea Brawl, I've got to knock out an Armada fleet. I'm going to do Abyssal Dwarves for Adepticon, and then for Adepticon, or specifically Adepticon Clash, I'm thinking Goblins. I've never actually brought my Goblins out. They're just a fun army, and I think that'd be fun. So I'll probably have to paint up a couple more units. And Mantic, if you're listening, please get us some hard plastic Fleabag Riders, or resin 3D printable Fleabag Riders would also be acceptable. That's the one unit that I don't have models for. They have hack paws, right? So I mean, if you just want to make some new riders and give us the same mounts that the hack paws use, I guess that would be okay. Hobby wise, Jeremy and Matt, my new favorite thing in the whole wide world, something Dan put me onto, is called AK Interactive Ultra Matte Varnish. This stuff on dull coat, it's so matte. It brushes on or airbrushes equally well. It's my go-to varnish from now on. It's pricey. It's like $13 for a relatively small bottle, but it's awesome. How about you, Matt? I know you're probably 2 fists into a halfling army.
Well, I am. I already had a bit done up, but I've had in my head, I need to get ahead before the year gets too busy of my hobby goals. So I've just been at first punching out the halflings. So since Christmas, so just before Christmas, I did my Sisterhood Horde finally, which I showed you guys. And then since Christmas, I did my Firefight Army, which was that green and pink atrocity. 2 units of Juggers, a regiment of Braves, 2 lawnmowers, and now I'm working on some poachers, 2 regiments of poachers. And I'm doing that just trying to knock some stuff off that is partly hobby goal related and partly my pile of opportunity that was kind of already built, just so that I can get it done. And also with my halflings, I've had a playable number of points for a while, but I didn't build it in a way that I've actually been happy to put on the table. So I'm just trying to get some more flexibility in what I have. And, while of that, I'm doing some stuff on UB about trying to decide whether I actually do Trident Realms or the Abyss. I was really keen on the Abyss, but then there's so many boxes being bought around locally that I'm kind of like, I don't know if I want to do it. So I'm thinking Trident Realms because I've got a mega army box in the cupboard. So just trying to figure out if there's something in there I might like. And we'll see. And how about you, Jeremy? How's that Northern Alliance coming?
Good. I've been painting a lot, actually. Now that I finished the MCP, I'm full bore into Northern Alliance. I have basing, my taken to the cleaner resin basing, as we've talked about, that I overpaid for, is coming along great. I've started work on ice elementals. I'm inspired by Wapple did a oil. Speaking of oil paints, Rob, Wapple did a great tutorial on oil painting ice elementals. So I'm sort of using that for an inspiration, and I'm using acrylic paints, but I'm going for that non-metal metallic, highly reflective ice look. And so far, I think it's coming along okay. I think it looks good for the most part, being my first attempt. I think it adds a little bit more flavor and dynamic visual interest to the ice elementals than just doing like a dry brush or something like, or a traditional style highlight. It is taking a long time to finish. And I know I already always take a long time to finish, but this is taking especially long time to finish. But I think it's going to look really good in that I'm going for like lots of cool colors on the models, like whites and blues and whatever. But the bases themselves have lots of reds and oranges because it's fall. So I think that red, orange, and blue, it's such a classic contrasting colors. I think the army itself is going to look super, super great. So I'm working on the ice elementals. I already have my Snow Troll Prime done. I'm assembling some of the other stuff. I'm looking to try to get enough for the pairings tournament at Adepticon, which is 1,200 points. I made an army list for that, of trying to get some Northern Alliance ready for that. But probably the full unveil will be Bay of Kings in September. Probably will be the full army. But I'm getting 2 to 3 hours in every day. I'm still loving the Fanatics paints from Army Painter. What I found is I'm getting the most out of them by using some of the technical stuff from Army Painter. They have a stabilizer, which is basically like a medium, but they also have a retarder. And if you've never used a retarder in painting, what it does is it helps maintain a liquid viscosity on the paint. It lessens, or it elongates its drying time. So it keeps the paint liquid longer. And especially if you're using a wet palette. So I found that for every drop of Fanatics paint, I try to do half a drop of the stabilizer and half a drop of the retarder. And that, to me, I'm getting that silky, like skim milk ideal texture for my style of painting. I like to do more thin layers and glazing. So I want my paint like the Reaper style thinness. So I found that getting the most out of those Fanatic paints is don't be afraid to experiment with their stabilizer and their retarder. But now that I've used their paints, I painted 3 or 4 MCP models, and now I'm working on a King's Army. I continue to just absolutely love that paint line. But in general, really excited with the Northern Alliance. I'm still super jacked to use that moving forward. So I thought we would check, as we talk about this hobby, and we do our little hobby updates. I thought we would just go around the horn. Let's start with you, Rob. We're in February, so still early, but we sucked so hard last year.
We need to have like accountability this year, right?
You're my accountability buddy.
Yeah. So hobby commitments for 2025. I had 4 goals. The first one is paint 1,000 points. That's almost done. Second one was paint 250 points for Armada. As soon as I finish this BCB army, I'm all in on 250 points for Abyssal Dwarves. And then I have 2 more for 2025. I've got to paint 2,500 points of Kings of War. Still not sure what army I'm going to do. I might be looking for something else to use oil paints on. That was a lot of fun. And I have to paint 2,000 points of GCPS, but I have to tell you, this month's Mantic Vault offering, there's some cool stuff in there, and it sort of made me go, well, maybe I need to add this to the list, and maybe I need to add the list to the list. So we'll get back to that. But Matt, how about you and your 2025 hobby commitment?
I'd basically ticked off the first one then, I just realised. So I could stop on the halflings, but I'll keep going. And then I didn't realise that I'd actually specified Abyss. So that means I'm going to have to pick Abyss now, doesn't it? Oh, that's not a bad thing. I don't mind that. I've done the 1250 of Firefight. Man, 2,000 points of Firefight is a lot, Rob. Like even 1250, like Luke Schaefer was able to write me a list at 1250 that had 100 Night Stalker models. And I asked him to cut it down, and it got down to 47. So 2,000 is a lot.
That's big. That is really big. Yeah.
And then 1,000 of another King's Army, which, well, maybe I'll end up doing Abyss and Trident Realms. Or I actually have primed and ready to go, Jeremy, some chariots for Basilia.
Ooh, nice.
So, and I've got some ways to speed that up, which is good. Like the reds I've used on Basilia, I've managed to get a spray in the same colour because it's Vallejo, most of the colour. So that could speed up some of my undercoating if I do a couple of layers of that. So I think the 1,000 will end up being that, but we'll see. At the moment, I'm on fire. Jeremy, you touched on it, but how do we think you're going to hit your goals?
Well, I've already achieved one of my goals already, and it's February, so you all can suck it.
Well, I do notice that one of your goals is hopefully for ACON. So we're going to see Northern Alliance at ACON?
Well, I'm trying for the pairings tournament, like I said in the hobby update. So which is 1,200 points. So I'm working on that. I did finish the MCP team, so that's out of the way. So the X-Men are done. So I can fully focus on Northern Alliance. Spending a lot of time on Masters, which is going really great. And then the Northern Alliance, I really feel is going to happen this year. Like I said, I'm into a good rhythm. I'm painting 2 to 3 hours every night. I think that it's coming out. My vision for the army is coming out, which is when you have in your head how you want something to look, and then it comes out that way. To me, that builds momentum. It's nothing more frustrating or stymies creativity when you have in yourself a vision and you just can't execute it.
For sure. It also helps that you have a sunk cost here. You've got to see this through, man. As much money as you spend on basing material.
I have to. And the army itself, this is a really expensive project. So it's like, if I want to keep living in Shangri-La here, I got to make sure
exactly.
I'm not wasting my hobby money.
You don't want Stacey finding that full box of stuff and going, what's this for, Jeremy? And how much did this cost?
Now that I'm fully followed Rob down the action figure collection train. That's been a whole other conversation. And I just keep telling her, I was like, oh, no, honey, I got this on Whatnot. It was only $4. So don't worry about it. Which is true some of the time, right? You can find good deals on action figures.
A slippery slope, my friend.
She's like, how's your little dolls?
How's your little dolls? Yeah.
I go, they are action figures. They are not dolls.
At least she's not saying, have you spent your pocket money this week?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, she's like, yeah, no more. If you spend your allowance, you don't get any more. But yeah, so I think I'm feeling much better about this year's hobby. Being able to fully focus on Kings now, I think is both not just time-wise of painting, but mental thinking, knowing that I only have this project to work on now, I think is also making me paint more often because I'm not overwhelmed by, I got to finish this game system, and then I got to do this, and then I got to, just deciding, okay, now I'm spending my paint time painting Kings of War has made that easier. So far, not so bad.
Well, on that note, let's take a quick commercial break. On the other side, we will get into feedback and engagement.
I'm Jordan Nichols, one of the 2023 Brush with Death winners, and you're listening to Countercharge.
Hey, this is Mike Rossi, author of Honor's Price. I wrote the first dwarf novel, and I still came in second. and you're listening to Countercharge.
Welcome back to Countercharge, and as we alluded to before the break, we're going to get into your feedback. And as a reminder, please give us feedback wherever you listen to this podcast, whether it's Apple, Podbean. We love it. Also, we're not everywhere on social media, so feel free to share the show or an episode if you think folks would find it useful. A prime example is Army reviews. Sharing them to an Army-specific Facebook group would be awesome. So with that, let's get into it. We don't have a lot of comments this month. We would love to have some more reviews on Apple. And on Podbean, we did have a great review from Andy Wang. He says, great podcast. Rob and company tackle a wide variety of topics connected to Kings of War in an enjoyable manner. My intro to this podcast was 528, a very special episode with Mike Rossi, which I still have downloaded and still listen to on the regular. The discussion really is timeless and has become more special as I've gotten older. Thanks, guys, and keep countercharging. Andy, that's a great call out. I love that episode too. And we had Mike Rossi on, and we just sort of chatted about whatever, you know, all kinds of things tangential to Kings of War. So yeah, it was a great one. So we'll put a link to it in the show notes if you're so inclined to catch up. Spotify, no new comments. Amazon Music, no comments because they don't let you have comments. You would think Amazon would give the listener the ability to give some feedback. And if you're on the Kings of War forum, we do have a thread there that we post the episodes, and we're happy to engage there as well. And next up, we've got some Mantic news. We did want to share, if you haven't already seen the news, there is a new errata and FAQ up. I did want to mention that I did see a couple complaints about having errata this soon after the drop of Clash of Kings. Specifically, we had a comment that said, I think publishing books that need corrections after not even 3 months of real-world play should be left to GW. Kings of War has mostly dodged Mantic's dodgy QC in the past, but looks like the field has been equalized in the wrong direction almost all the time. There are some corrections which are printing errors, but I figured it'd also be a good reminder that Clash of Kings has traditionally included experimental rules that need more playtest and more public opinion. This is especially true when we're approaching another edition, and I think we all know that 4th edition is probably not that far out. I'm sure some folks remember Heavy Flyers. You know, that was a rule in a Clash of Kings book that never got into the main rule book. But the spiritual successor to that rule was the idea that not all flyers needed to be speed 10 and nimble. You know, Command Dice had a big change, and I think anything marked optional, you know, should be looked in the same way, that it's an experimental rule, put it out to get feedback from a wider player base. These changes in particular are really not corrections. It's more about refining the playtest. But I don't know, what do you guys think about that? You know, I always like to caution people, Clash of Kings is not some set in stone book that locks everything in.
You know, and it's also important to know sometimes the RC is not always given the time maybe that they would want or need or whatever. Mantic's release dates are their release date. So sometimes stuff just makes it through all, you know, the editing effort. And in the end, if there are mistakes, what would you rather have? Have them stay there, or do you want them to get fixed? Or errata or whatever. And I think especially in this Clash, since it was introducing very much a beta component, like this version of Command Dice is the beta version of Command Dice, right? It is not it is definitely like, hey guys, 4th is coming soon. We're throwing some stuff up on the chalkboard. Give it a shot. So I don't know what you think, Matt, but I'm not really surprised that they're coming out with some updates.
No, I can understand some complaint about it being so soon after. It is nothing like GW at all. They haven't put out a product that's absolutely broken and then tried to walk it back 6 months later. Like, that is completely removed from the other models that you see it happening with. So there was also a comment in the Discord around it, and I always make the mistake of commenting in Discord and then I never look at it again to see the follow-up. It's like a month later, but about, you know, why are Mantic doing this? I don't think this was particularly Mantic driven. There were people at Mantic that didn't even know it was going out. Okay, and like that was public. So I think there was an element of people thought there were some things that needed correction, and people like, oh, you know, who's been complaining about that the rolling the dice at the start is too many? Well, there's been heaps of people complaining about the imbalance in Command Dice. So changing it to multiple reds makes it that little bit harder. And I think what we were seeing at the moment, and like I'm not necessarily saying that I think it was necessarily, it probably wasn't this bit, but the way they had it with red, white, and blue blue wasn't enough really to change anyone's list writing. And if you want to have command dice, you probably need it to influence list writing to see what's the real influence on the game. And it's a way of bringing back those ones that got a little bit better commands to make it a little bit harder to achieve.
And let's dive in and unpack that a little bit, Matt. The command dice change is specifically the pool is changing from 1 red, 1 white, 1 blue to 3 red. And this is my perspective, and we'll share your perspective in a minute. There's lots of comments on the Facebook group about this topic. But I think most would agree that faction command orders are not all created equal. So you've got some factions that have really solid commands that are seeing play and some that are not. To your point, Matt, I sort of see this change as kind of leveling the playing field. If you have a faction with good faction orders, you will need to opt in and probably buy additional dice to improve your ability to cast. On the other hand, if you have a faction with underwhelming faction orders or ones you just don't use, you're not out of anything if you don't use them. You can just skip them all together.
When you're looking at command orders, there's a couple levers on the machinery of Genesis and balance, right? You have the lever of the orders themselves. As far as looking at, is this a cohesive space of game design, balanced space of game design? You have the orders themselves, right? Your generic orders versus your faction orders. Thinking about, are they balanced? How do they work together? Are some better, some worse? Another lever you have is, how do you get those orders? Are your faction orders, does everyone get them in your army? Are they linked to heroes or commanders like how they are in Firefight, which is an area and direction I hope that they maybe think about exploring? And then I think that last lever of balance is, how do we generate the game resource to pay for those orders? So I think in this phase of command orders, they're really having a nice interplay, thinking about all of those levers, right? Let's try this lever. Okay, let's reduce the points. Or let's try this lever and think about, how do you get the command orders? Or let's try this lever in, maybe this order is too good in this faction, or maybe this order in another army is not good enough. So I really think if you conceive and conceptualize the command orders as that we are in the beta of command orders, I think it creates a little bit more of an environment ripe for feedback and for growth, because these are not, I think, based on just what they've said and just kind of how the game is developed, we're not going to just see what we have right now in fourth with a minor tweak here and there. I imagine they're really going to look at the system as a whole and think about, how do we refine for fourth edition? So, but how do we get feedback, Rob? We use the command orders. I am more of the mind of, and I understand on some level the argument from players who want to create as little variance as possible. I get it, but it isn't chess. We do roll dice. I think we should be trying to play with these as much as possible so that we can, on the greater scale of the community, right, provide the feedback that maybe can be a great tool going into fourth edition.
Totally agree. I think there's still too many events and things that are making decisions about whether they use them or not based on opinion, not on actual use. I've done the method and there's too many unbalanced command dice. Just play with them and see what happens, right? Play with them and see what happens at actual tournaments. If we want to know whether it's going to work in tournaments, the only way is to include it and use it, not to theory hammer it.
Yeah, so we did post on the Facebook group what people thought about the changes. And you guys had a few comments on the change to the command dice pool. First up, we got Matthew Temple. He said, I personally like the changes to command dice. If you want to use the good commands consistently, now you have to pay points to get more command dice. I think it balances things out more. And that's kind of what I was trying to allude to before, Matt, that it feels like you're having to opt in. If you want to use them, especially the more powerful ones, you're going to have to spend some resources, spend some points from your army list to buy more dice.
Yeah, I'm playtesting a game now using command dice the same way I was, which was just buying multiple reds. Doesn't work the same now with the change. I'm not consistently getting as many points as I did, so I will actually look towards the white and the blue now if I want to use them in an army. Next up, we've got Chet Dudik. I like the changes to command dice. I think it was too powerful before. At least now armies need to spend points to get substantial command dice. They also need to put those points on a character, which allows for some counterplay. I like it. Furthermore, the Nagari were too weak. This should help, which was another change that we didn't discuss yet.
We'll get to that one. Next up, we got Colin Mack. He said, dang, they nerfed command dice. 3 rad instead of 1 of each is an off. Next up, we got Mecha Sturgeon. I think the command dice change was an overreaction. If things continue down this path, it will be a failed experiment, considering the main aim was to bring flavor and variety. I mean, I think this is really about balancing between the armies. I don't know, Matt, what do you think?
I'm the same. I think it's more about making it harder for the ones that got better ones than it is about anything else. And I think that's fine. I don't think it'll particularly hurt the ones that you didn't particularly like them anyway. Tom Annis, who was saying that we were getting too many free command points when many GTs are already opting out of using them. I think that's exactly why. Yeah, because plenty of people were saying that there was imbalance. And so I assume that is the theory behind. I don't know, but I assume this is the theory behind the change.
Yeah, Dylan Scribner says, I'm not sure I agree with base pool changing for command dice. If you want the commands to meaningfully affect the game, it forces you to spend 20 plus points on just more dice, in my opinion. I think that's the point.
Yeah, so for example, like Jeremy, if you were playing Night Stalkers, getting the Furious Charge is awesome command, right? Would you be likely to now invest in a blue or white dice to get it compared to before?
Yes. And I still think I keep coming, and I think not only does it link with what we said, but it talks about what Yan Zilai says about maybe the being too premature. Let's utilize this time right now while fourth is being developed to around command dice. Let's just try as much stuff as possible. Let's try this next month or so 3 red dice. If it doesn't like it, let's try this amount of dice. I think the more that we try now and the more nuance and variation and more feedback that we can get in the next few months, the more ammo that they'll have while creating fourth. So again, I just keep going back to thinking of the command dice as this is open beta for command dice right now. So view it as that. Don't view it as like a as hardcore completed. I don't know what you guys think. I mean, does that resonate with you?
It's an experimental optional rule,
right?
And they're just tweaking it to try to really hone in. They're just trying to, as you said before, pull different levers to get more people to use them. Next up, we have David Musgrave. He says, not played with command dice, but from what I've heard, some factions were getting too good a deal from the 4-point commands that you could more or less guarantee by just getting a single extra die. And then we got Lamar Eddings. The command dice didn't surprise me much, as at Siege of Augusta, I paid for an extra blue, but had leftover points on most turns.
Then Jan Zilai, I feel the command dice changes are a bit premature. They've barely been in circulation for 2 months. Unsure how many tournaments have actually tried the mechanic rather than just ban it outright for the start. Clash AU ran with command dice, and I think the general consensus that it was fine, albeit needing some refinement and worth more testing for the community. And I can understand that point of view of the, not really being enough data to change to the 3 red. I can get that through as well. And Andrew Whitehead and Matthew Selleck agreed with him. And then we move on to another change, which is about loot tokens. From a narrative sense, this makes sense, I guess. It's we had a situation in the game before where, something with unit strength 1, let's just say it's an ogre warlock, could carry as many tokens as they could. Ogres are pretty strong, but are they going to have it on their back under each arm and balancing on their head? I'm not sure. What I like about changes like this is that it can affect list building. So on other channels, someone had said something like, I think it restricts your list building. And I'm like, no, it just changes your list building options, right? You just can't use potentially the same strategy you did before. Now you got to think differently, and we evolve. What do you think there, Jeremy?
My only caveat is I wish they would just flat out make it you can only carry as many loot tokens as you have unit strength, as opposed to you can carry as many as you want, but only score loot tokens up to your unit strength. I think it's just cleaner just to say flat out, let's try, you can only carry your loot tokens up to your unit strength, because I know we're going to have a lot of questions about, okay, so you can only score up to your unit strength, but can I carry more? Right? It just seems cleaner. Just say you can carry as many loot tokens as your unit strength. But in general, I do like it as a overall concept. I think sometimes we've gone towards trying to get unit strength out of everything, right? Like when you have the option to, or getting multiple instances of lower unit strength, because it's harder to kill 5 drops. So I'll have like the unit strength 1 or unit strength 2 go pick up 5 tokens and run away, and you just can't do that right now. So in general, I think it's a good rule. I think they could maybe just, I don't know, clean it up by just saying you can only carry loot up to your unit strength.
Agree. I think it would be easier if they just said, and cleaner, if they just said you can carry up to your unit strength.
And then you score any loot token you carry. Bob's your uncle.
Yeah. And I think, Matt, I think you're right. It is going to change list building, right? And we did have a few comments on the Facebook group. You know, Jeff Bodine said, seems like everyone is happy with the loot change. It hurts armies like ogres, but oh well, I guess.
And then Tom, he must have been in a grumpy mood. He doesn't like any of these changes. Hey, Tom, you all right, mate? You all right? And was there an outcry about unit strength 1 units holding multiple loot tokens? If there was, I did not hear it. Look, I would say probably not specifically, but there's been outcry about scoring nimble character units that are unit strength 1 in general for a long time, right? About how powerful they are if they're not equitably distributed across armies. So I think this is a change that it may not grossly change list building, but it's just a little knock to those. So that's okay, in my mind. Opinion.
100%. And then we got David Musgrave said, loot counter change I think is fine. And then P2 said, the loot change is, for me, very welcome. The less hero hammer and single entity circus we incentivize, the better in my mind. And then the third change we wanted to just mention is the Nagari change. And Matt, I know you have thoughts.
Oh, well, I don't know. They seem to be dissenting. I feel like I must be Tom Annis on this point. You know, it's that I just it's gone to melee 3, which I don't really think changes much because it's like a speed 6, 12 attack unit, you know, unit 3, unit 4. It just seems that there's often this thing, and we saw this probably more so in the past than we do now in our list builders, of people kind of bagging anything that couldn't hit hard, you know? And like there is such thing as a support unit. And I totally agree that the formation 1 with nimble is a much better, and it's likely the only one you take. And, you know, people say, oh, maybe they want to sell more models of the Nagari. I don't think changing them to melee 3 will sell more models. Someone said it was about ambush boxes. The whole point of an ambush box now is that it's meant to be the formation. So that's only one box anyway. So I just don't quite get it, this change. I believe that like an aura of Regen 4 plus, particularly the formation 1.
That's why you take it, not because they punch hard.
Yeah.
Because they're giving 4 plus regen aura. That's why.
They've still got unit strength.
And if you get them killed, the aura is gone. So you're not probably putting them into harm's way. You're keeping them back.
Yeah, and that's their function, you know. So I don't personally feel it was needed from the time that I've used them, because I totally use them as a support unit. Other people obviously do feel like something was needed. If something was needed, I don't think melee 3 is going to do anything on a low attack, slow, big base thing. Did you have thoughts on that, Jeremy, on that change?
I've only used them a couple times when I was playtesting during playtesting.
Yeah, well, you know,
and I tend to run them more in like my spam, abyssal trash, abyssal guard, you know, like a generally low attack army, but one that has regen 4 up on defense 5 things. So I never really had them as like any damage that they did was like bonus. I get it, you know, people want to, you know, not feel like everything, like a unit like that hits like a wet noodle. I probably maybe would have, you know, given them more attacks and kept melee 4 as opposed to 3. But, you know, again, I kind of feel so much of this clash is all just like, I don't want to take away from this season, right? But under the umbrella of 4th, to me, a lot of the stuff we're trying now, I don't have a strong emotional attachment. You know, I maybe emptied my emotional bank after the TK nerf. You know what I mean? So I'm more of just kind of like, let's just try stuff with eyes set on the future. So I don't really have a strong opinion about this one, I guess I'm trying to say.
In terms of the rest of the errata and FAQ, it's really, in my mind, just a general cleanup or some actual corrections to printing errors, which, you know, are definitely needed. So with that, let's take another quick commercial break, and on the other side, we'll get in and chat about the Mantic Vault.
This is Shannon Shoemaker, the ex-Kings of War player, and you're listening to Countercharge.
And we are back. So this month's Mantic Vault is a really nice split between sci-fi and fantasy this month. We're getting some cool halfling stuff, some cool GCPS stuff, some basing. One thing I'll comment on, because I had bought some for my GCPS from Statuesque Miniatures when I was going to do the Maybe It's Maybelline cover girls is that they have released a bunch of female resin heads for GCPS, which is super awesome. And some of them look really nice. But what do you guys think? I think it's a really nice mixture this month.
Oh, yeah. Tasty. Some bases, some halfling stuff. So we've got a muster captain, another, all the halfling characters basically that are on foot, and some extra bits. Like you said, a nice mix. I think this is a great one. And a troll, a troll with the pintle gun guy on top. So, yeah, I think it's cracking.
What's really cool is the halflings, it looks like you can feel the complete halfling vanguard faction, or you can just feed him into your Kings of War army. And I love the dungeon bases. I think that's cool. It allows you to go ahead and base them up for vanguard. The GCPS are a problem for me though, because I'm looking at them and going, I need to redo some of my models. So now I got to get a bunch of stuff printed so I can go back and replace some of the older bits and bobs that I had with this cool new stuff. I mean, those backpacks there are totally rad, and they have so many different alternate heads now, and all the different special weapons like flamers and melee weapons. It looks like. I mean, it's just so cool, man.
This release makes me curious. What do you guys think if they started doing like actual pre-bitified printable multi-bases based on factions?
Oh, I would love that. I would. I mean, these are individual model bases that they've put out, but what if they brought out, because it wouldn't be very hard to do either.
A large infantry horde side base for Basilean that has a lot of the Mantic bespoke proprietary helmets or shields or, designed into the base. So Bob's your uncle, you just print out the multi-base.
And I don't think it exists at the moment. Like most companies have squares or circles, and it's not necessarily that easy to shove a bunch together unless you're basing individually. So, yeah, it could be something.
Back in the day, Rob, didn't you have a prefab multi-base project you guys were working on?
Yeah, there was a guy who was making some a long time ago, but that's long since gone. There's nobody. There are companies that make really wide panels, if you will, bases that can be cut down to the certain size, but nobody's making specific ones to Kings of War. And there's really nobody making ones that have Kings of War bits built in.
And Mantic, I think, could do that. They have all the files, right? So you can do like an abyssal, half of an abyssal, lower abyssal coming out of the base because he's coming out of a swamp, a fire. So I think that there's some cool creative space there. They should take a look at that.
Yeah, the only thing is that technically it'll make it a harder print for some people. So I don't know if that would hold them back. But yeah, I like the idea.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a printer myself, so the technical side. That's why I'm the idea man.
Jeremy prints checks.
Yeah,
exactly. I don't print.
He never pays to print money.
Yeah. If you aren't on the Mantic Vault Facebook group, you should. It's a great little place. They have a lot of good discussion. People give each other tips on how to print some of the new stuff coming out. So we'll have a link to that in the Facebook group. With that, let's take a quick commercial break. On the other side, we will get into the topic of the month. We'll be right back.
This is Nicholas Lee, the greatest Empire of Dust player in Southeast Asia, and you're listening to Countercharge.
And welcome back. And now we're going to get on to our actual topic of the month. We're almost an hour in, Jeremy, and we're finally getting to the topic of the month.
I know lots of juicy stuff to talk about this month.
So much. Well, great month. Our question this month was, what is your favorite scoring system and why? We're going to go through your comments and we'll provide, a little bit of commentary on that. We can see that there's a few different ones mentioned. The top ones mentioned would be Northern Kings, Blackjack, Bart Shroud, and a couple of different ones. I think the first thing that I'd like to say about different scoring systems is, even with Blackjack, when we were designing it, is a lot of it is actually just about optics, and a lot of what you think it's trying to do, or what your impression of what it does, or your initial feel of what it does, might actually, not influence things too much. A lot of the time it's just about, the feel of what's happening in the game. Would you agree on that, Jeremy?
100%.
We'll dive straight into the comments, and as each scoring system comes up, we might, for people that don't know, just touch on what it is. So the first comment is from Matthew Selleck, who says, Blackjack, I always feel like there's something for me to do in the game for all 6 to 7 turns. Even if I've played poorly and know I'm losing the game, I can really focus on minimizing the loss through objectives and as a final resort attrition. And so for those that haven't used it, Blackjack basically has So for a win and a loss, it's 14-7. The only way where it doesn't add up to 21 is if there's a dead draw of 10-10. But basically offering 21 points for the game. And then there's 4 points available for how well you win the scenario by. So the difference between your opponent's points. And then there's 3 points available for how much the difference between how much you kill versus your opponent. Now, some people don't like the maths of it, but if you're using a piece of tournament software or sheets or something, there's plenty of ways where basically all the player has to do is put in their own attrition points and all the calculations are done for you. Although I found on the weekend that in the Mantic Companion because when Blackjack was designed, it was designed with a few points levels in mind and didn't necessarily do a formula for the swings, but Elliot had just made up a formula to put in Companion, so they weren't quite right. And generally the idea has been just choose what's closest. But, any kind of sheet or tournament scoring software can probably do the difference for you to take away some of that complexity.
Yeah, and one other thing I'll say, sometimes it's been attributed to Winston Churchill or other people, that quote about democracy, right? Democracy is the worst form of government besides all the other forms of government.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that's true to tournament systems. There is yet to be a designed tournament system, I think, scoring system that is perfect, right? There are ones that are of what we have, like of these like crappy ways to score tournaments. What's the best that we happen to have? So I don't think there is a tournament scoring system for all people, right? No man for all seasons.
And that's right. And generally, you play to the pack, right? And so with different ones, different tournament systems, they might actually be designed to make you do something different. So interestingly, with Blackjack originally, it was started being designed before unit strength had come in. So it was actually originally designed to kind of build the army so there wasn't quite as much, 6-7 unit alpha strike armies on the table that could wipe off a new player. It was designed to kind of force you into playing scenario a bit more. And then unit strength came in and it biased that even more. And so pushed us. And so with Selec's comment too, I actually haven't seen anything else played in Australia by Blackjack. So we're probably also not the best to be commenting on the others.
It's funny because I think scoring systems are a lot like comp in that they just move the goalposts, right? And there's not a right or wrong. And I personally love when there's different scoring systems. I think multiple scoring system is the spice of life because, to your point, Matt, different scoring systems will have a different impact. And so playing different systems, I think, is a positive thing.
I totally agree.
Because it's what do you want to happen, right? So much if you're like, well, what's the best scoring system? It's like, okay, well, tell me more, right? What do you value as a player, or what do you want to promote in your event?
I have an army that I played a few years ago. It's like all Fleabag riders. I can't play that under Blackjack and win. I'm going to lose attrition in every single game. But I can play scenario well.
From your guys' feedback, I think we'll see that. We'll see sort of in these conversations what people like about packs really much mirrors what they want out of the game, right? So again, a different pack, like how you say, Rob, there's a game for everyone and everyone for a game. I think that's kind of the same around packs, our tournament scoring system. So next on the list, we got Paul Collins. He's of the mind where he doesn't really mind what scoring system you use. In his opinion, it doesn't make too much of a difference. However, he does dislike scoring systems that reward or encourage draws. He wants there to be a decisive outcome. So he doesn't want, because sometimes maybe you'll do that, right? You'll be like, okay, well, I have a chance to win, but if I draw, it's much better for my overall, structure. So maybe I'm just going to play a little bit more timid and draw is the correct tournament strategy. Whereas I think Paul wants, he wants blood for the blood god. There must be a winner and a loser. So,
all right. Well, next up, we've got Danny Graves. He says, I love Northern Kings. It's not just the win. It's extra points for killing and claiming objectives count a lot, which gives a broader representation of an army's skill set. It promotes a more balanced army list construction. Plus, it doesn't involve you needing to punish your opponent to get a higher score than them in that particular game, which makes it more friendly. Because it's got a higher possible points limit, 25, it also helps spread out the leaderboard. I guess the best way to describe Northern Kings, it's Blackjack, but with only positive. And what I mean by that is on the scenario points, you only go up. It's not a difference of. And same thing for attrition. So attrition, it's how many points did you kill regardless of what you lose. I'm just thinking like Invade Northern Kings, you get X amount of scenario points for X amount of unit strength on the other side of the table, regardless of what your opponent has. And the same thing holds true for kill points.
Yeah, there's no negative points, right? You're only adding to your score. You're not being like, well, in a blackjack, it's going to be 21-0, whereas in a Northern Kings, whatever points you get, you get. So no matter how well your opponent does, it's just adding more points for them. It's not taking any points away from you. So I guess just on a feeling, you're never going to get a 0 in a Northern Kings that you could get in a lot of other scoring systems. You're always going to get a certain amount of points.
That speaks to what we said at the top, Jeremy, doesn't it? Which is largely optics and feel. It's not actually an appreciable impact on the game.
It's taking away a feel bad, right? There's nothing worse. Or for some players, right, you play in a tournament and you get 0 points out of a game. That's not so much. That is not very fun. Whereas let's say you pull out 5 or 6 points, in the end, your opponent, the difference is still theoretically the same, right? As if your opponent had 21 points and you had 0. If they have 26 and you are 25 and you have 5, the difference is still the same on some level. But I think as far as your emotional or your interaction with the game itself, you're leaving the game maybe feeling like you still accomplished something in your loss.
And next up, we had Mark Otley, I think Northern Kings for the same reason as Danny says above. Although what would be really interesting with these people about the feel good is the people who ask would be bottom table players, right? Do people really, really like if they get a 0 versus a 5 in blackjack versus a 5 in Northern Kings? I'm not sure. I know personally I'd be like, wow, either way I got my ass handed to me. But like some people, it's different. Some people are different.
Next up, we've got Richard Miles. He says, Northern Kings. Other systems seem to result in too much clustering within the ranks. And then David Musgrave says, echo the Northern Kings comments above. One more important distinction about Northern Kings, it's not zero sum. So your gain doesn't take away from your opponent. And there is an opportunity for shenanigans.
Yeah.
You can work the system so that you both net what you want. So just keep that in mind, that because it isn't my gain is your loss, there's not that internal mechanic to keep you from exploiting the system. And we have some comments about that later.
Yeah, and to me, that's always, I've never played it, but that's always been optically the main drawback to me is that, you get to big tournaments. Some people take big tournaments very seriously, that, would they game it if they're playing a club mate late in the piece? But you can game any of the systems. So, you could even in blackjack, but the difference with zero sum, like you said, Rob, is that, if you're both in the running to be podiumed, you wouldn't want to do that under a zero sum.
You can't both get positive draws, right? In blackjack, for example.
Correct. Yeah.
Next, we got Tom Freeman, who says, I feel they are all a bit needlessly complicated. Personally, as a halfling player, systems that reward kill points with tournament points are skewed towards Alpha Strike armies and undermine those armies that tend to suffer heavy losses that on their route to win. So again, Tom's bringing out a point, right? The tournament scenario packs that reward with tournament points heavily attrition, right? That sometimes can struggle for those armies that win, but win by allowing you to kill all their stuff. So again, something to think about when you're building towards a certain tournament system.
And I should mention the countercharge scoring system that we use at Kings of Memphis doesn't have attrition or kill points. And we do see different armies there because of that exact thing. Armies that play scenario well, but maybe die easily, they're viable under our system. Next up, we got Adrian Scott. He says, I prefer the hat directive. At the beginning of the day, the judges award a winner based entirely on who's wearing the biggest and most extravagant hat. After the requisite certificate and golf claps, games commence with players having a few jolly good matches of the Kings of the Wars. Slightly more seriously, I genuinely don't care what criteria the judges use to score tournaments. So long as I can spend the day playing a variety of friendly players, I'm satisfied. And then Kyle Poole says, my favorite system is the one where we decide who gets best sport.
I haven't used the countercharge one yet, Rob, and I think probably not enough people have commented on it because it doesn't get commented on. But I like that idea of no attrition in a way. I think the using attrition is a hangover from, because when on 20-0, right, you needed a tiebreaker, which was attrition. So we've always included attrition, but it kind of also then it automatically deals with the age-old. I think we see this later there's always been an argument by, doesn't matter how much you win a scenario by, or is it just by winning the scenario? And so you kind of get rewarded for winning the scenario well, but not without doing that additional thing. So yeah, I quite like that idea. Matthew Schenker says, cough, Carolina Cryptid GT, progressive scoring. I'd love to go over it on another cast, hint, hint, but I find it makes the I do all in my turn and then you do all in your turn more engaging. Having no idea what it is, I think basically his next bit of the comments won't make sense to anyone.
It is progressive on steroids.
And by progressive, we mean that you score points throughout the game as opposed to what is the board state at the end of the game. Josh Lafoon, sad thing, I've run multiple tournaments and play in multiple tournaments a year and couldn't explain the difference between systems without looking it up. No, I just show up and have a good time and hope both my opponent and I have a great time. At the end of the day, when points are tallied, I'm still losing to Adam Ballard.
Amen, brother.
Fair point. Fair point, my friend.
And I think this is the thing. I don't believe generally that you see a difference. The scoring system doesn't affect the podium, right? Because the guys on the podium are reading the pack, looking at the tournament system and deciding how they want to play it, generally, right? The guys and girls at the top.
They're adjusting their list based on the pack.
Yeah. Next up is Mike Adkins with Bart Shroud, another one I haven't played. He said he likes Black Jacket rewards, both scenario and killing things with the emphasis on scenario. Like Northern Kings, it's so back to Bart Shroud. Like Northern Kings, it's additive instead of delta-based. So it biases you towards action even late in the game, best of both worlds. I think all of them kind of bias you towards action late in the game, but I haven't played Bart Shroud, so I don't know enough. My understanding is essentially it's closer to Northern Kings. Like Northern Kings tried to take Blackjack and make it progressive, and then Bart Shroud's meant to be an improvement on that. Is that?
Yeah, I think you get points for scenario, you get points for attrition, and then they have some bonus objectives that you can pick, but it's all additive.
So it's closer to countercharge then, Rob, except that it's got kill.
Bart Shroud is based on Bull Shroud, which I believe was Mark Cunningham and Steve Hildrew. They'll correct me if I'm wrong. Next up, we've got Gabe Toth, who says Bart Shroud because it doesn't compare attrition between two players. Again, it goes back to that notion that it's additive like Northern Kings.
Just for Bart Shroud, you can get a score of 23 points per game. It's win, draw, loss. So a win is worth 10, a draw is worth 5, a loss is worth 1. There's 7 points for scenario, 4 points for attrition, 1 point for every 20% of your army's opponents routed, and bonus objectives can be worth an additional 2 points per game. So that's how you get to that 23 points. So again, it's a lot of stuff that you can think about, lots of different avenues or ways to score points in a game.
So next up, we've got Scott Bradley. I like Northern Kings because it encourages fun Hail Marys at the end for more attrition points.
We got our friend of the show, Jesse Garrett. Ooh, this is a hot take. He likes the 15-10-5 with an attrition modifier. I do not like scoring systems which reward winning scenario by a certain margin. I think scoring systems that want to reward both players so nobody feels bad and only counts positive attrition are terrible. See, you always count on Jesse for clear. He's not shy with his opinion. And I can't comprehend the idea that someone might feel bad because they lose points for losing a game where the goal is to win. So he's talking about what you might hear referred to as the win-loss draw, or more classic scenario where or 20-0, right? Where there's 20 possible points, 15 for a win, 10 for a draw, 5 for a loss. And then the last 5 points are adjusted based on where you're at, right? So there's a total of 20 points to be given between both players, depending on who won the scenario. And
if you win the game, you get 15 points, and if you table your opponent, you get an additional 5, right? Because your attrition score would be +5. And it's zero sum, so if you get 5, your opponent loses 5, right? And so they're 5 points for the loss. -5 for the attrition, they would be at 0. So it's the classic 20-0 system. Mark Zielinski's up next. I don't care what the scoring system is for the tournaments I attend, since I am not a hardcore tournament player and I'm not going to win. I'm at a tournament for the community and for the fun of playing.
MS Burger, the one preferred by whoever is able and willing to run an event. If you put in the effort of running an event, then I think you should be welcome to have it your way.
Next, we got Alan Meaner. He says, Blackjack, rewards scenario, but you also need to try and keep your army alive while destroying your enemy, which feels right to me. And then we've got Felix Castro, who says, my preference is for Blackjack or Northern Kings. I'm generally not good enough to tailor my army list to go with the scoring system. And then we got Marcelo says, Bart Shroud. You notice a trend, a lot of the Mid-Atlantic guys are saying Bart Shroud because they use a lot of Bart Shroud because Bart Kohler took the Bull Shroud from the UK and made it his own.
And I think that point of run the event you want, I think is also a key when you're thinking about scoring system. If you like a certain scoring system, use it at your tournament, right? You were the one running the tournament. So I love that. Or Rob, we've often said, run the event that you want to go to. So that's always something to keep in mind. But Chet Dudek talks about Blackjack. He says clean and simple. Michael Wayne, this is controversial, but I think Blackjack should be standard, or at least the master standard. It's better than the 15-10-5 standard and less explodable than Northern Kings. And I actually don't think that's super controversial. I think, I think Blackjack is one of the contenders. We've used it very often at Masters. And then Gordon Inez, I like Northern Kings. I think Blackjack can encourage armies that kill the opponent without them fighting back. Okay, again, he's talking about that alpha, right? He's shooting our alpha. In New Zealand, we have a new growing community, and I don't really want to see those type of armies becoming regular. I haven't tried Bart Shroud, but feel I would enjoy that also. Having said that, I'm happy to play Blackjack. I think it's a good change, shake-ups. I think it's good to change or try different scoring systems.
Yeah, I don't actually think his reasoning is consistent there, because there are more points available in Blackjack for scenario. And yes, if you kill your opponent quickly, you'll probably get the scenario. But will you have the amount of units to claim all the scenario to win scenario big? Because to get 21-0 in Blackjack, you basically need to get a massive difference. If it's 2,300 points, I think it's got to be more than 1,500 attrition difference, and you pretty much need almost all the scenario points to 0. So really alpha armies don't necessarily do well. So I think that might be potentially biased by Gordon, that they've used Blackjack and they just happen to be probably pretty good players using alpha armies in New Zealand, maybe. Would you agree with that, Rob?
Maybe I wouldn't say alpha armies, but shooting armies.
100%.
Table your opponent relatively quickly, especially if you're a better player than they are.
Yeah.
And it's a negative play experience. So next up we have Rick Hoy. Honestly, I like the variety here in Texas. Each of the 4 big tourneys runs something different. Lone Wolf typically runs a 0-20 system. Samurai Showdown runs a 0-24 system that adds an attrition in separate samurai character mission points. Alamo is a straight win-loss to see who advances through a single elimination March Madness style bracket. And Bayou Battles runs a World Cup style event that mixes a straight win-loss draw system for the 3 group stage games and a 0-20 system for the other half. Variety is good because it forces players to adjust from event to event. It keeps you on your toes. Matt, you want to take Jats?
Blackjack is fine. I don't necessarily agree with a Mantic-leaning hobby rubric. Mustn't have liked my hobby rubric for Clash. As the big difference maker here is people BYO models, but separate prizes for best performing Mantic armies. Yeah, I think primarily with this question we were talking about tournament system. The community I play with does not necessitate the need for a soft score for sportsmanship. I'm here for be fun, not to the winner, but also if you give up your time to run tournaments, you should get the privilege of making the terms of play.
Next up, we got Jeff Radigan, and I love this. Jeff likes win-loss draw. Margin of victory favors some army factions and archetypes over others, but everyone, except for Racked Slaves, can compete in win-loss draw. And the last comment is from Page Neo. He says, Northern Kings, the incremental pointing is more encouraging for the lower end players in the lower bracket in general. The top players are going to float to the top no matter the system. That's what you were saying earlier, Matt. We don't want the power bracket players to feel bad and quit the game.
Yeah, and so that goes to what I spoke to before, again, I guess we probably should ask the lower bracket players, people that regularly finishing down, what do they prefer? I can certainly get on board the idea of Jeff. Like, I think it's a valid argument. Doesn't matter how much you win the war by, but I think a lot of these systems are attempting to create more spread than what we used to have too. So, do you want your differential being attrition, or do you want it to be something that's more like differently game-based? And that's what it comes down to. And I would love to see more variety, 100%.
Yeah, I think this is something we should unpack in a future episode because, we had talked about it before, but like 40K uses this system where if you win, you get like 100,000 points. And then like the difference of victory is like 10,000 points, right? Like literally like winning is everything. And really the other stuff is just there to separate the winners, right? It would be fun to explore the different available Kings of War tournament scoring systems and get the pros and cons. And because to your point, Matt, I know here in the US we do a lot of blackjack, right? We do a lot of blackjack, a lot of Northern Kings, but things like the Carolina Cryptid, Countercharge, we have Bart Shroud. There are other events.
And like the thing on blackjack with the not creating spread is 100% right. You do get clumping. But then that just comes down again to preference, right? Because I would like to try something that creates more spread. But with what you said, Rob, it's kind of, if you have wins really valuable, I love the idea of someone that wins more games than anyone else is absolutely going to be the winner. But then if someone's racing ahead, does everyone else get a bit disinterested and despondent, So like the good thing about clumping is that everyone thinks they've got a chance, and going into a last round, you don't really know.
You got a chance till the end, right? It's not like Mario Kart where you can get the blue shell and you can make it up.
Exactly. But then it makes like the last scenario of a tournament and how the list goes, particularly if they're hidden, a little bit more biased and impactful. But, I can't say I've been to tournaments where we kind of go, an undeserving player won. Certainly not in the last few years, no matter the scoring system. All right. So that brings to the end our topic of the month. And after this commercial break, we'll be back with what we've got coming up for the show, a little bit of tidying up, and our closing remarks.
This is Michael Sigler, host of the Kansas City GT, and you are listening to Countercharge.
And welcome back. Don't forget you can help the show by sharing the show with the community, like we said towards the top of the show. Please give us a review. It helps other people find us and also helps us creep up the ladder compared to people who might like similar podcasts. So we're more likely to appear on feeds and things with reviews. If you're not going to give us a good review, though, go jump in the bin first. Yeah, we don't want it.
Go rate somebody else, right?
Yeah, exactly. If you're feeling like a 1 star, go give it to someone else. With the schedule, we've got a Lawmasters Library for February coming up with Honours Price, which of course is the venerable Mike Rossi's book, and it's being edited as we speak and will be out this month. Watch out for the Facebook poll for what book we do next, because you'll have to get your whole month of reading in then. We have lots of list builders upcoming, Robert, don't we? I've bagged one with Luke Schaefer. You'll hear a Clash of Kings episode shortly, but then we briefly talk about games, but then we've saved a couple of list builders there, but there's a bunch of those. So as you said, Rob, because you've bagged so many, we're probably going to have 1 or 2 a month. And, I like listening to the different theories.
And I know, Matt, you're working on the Journey to 28 show with Chris Lynch and Steve Evans?
That's right. What their journey playing all 28 armies in a year. So that'll be good fun. That's next weekend I'm recording, I think. So that's probably later in the month towards start of March release.
And I've got Forces of Nature is now in editing. So that army review should be out soon. And I know you guys have got Rory and Ogre in the pipe.
Also trying to there was an episode that we had talked about that had been requested about with bringing the Scrying Gems to talk intentional practice and intentional list design. How do you take list design from its genesis through play testing through deploying that list in a tournament? So that's hopefully going to be recording that here within the next couple of days, and that will be out for you guys shortly. And then after that, it will be the Ogre Army review, and just, and then just stay tuned. We're going to have a ton of Masters coverage this year. Still a couple months away, but.
And Adepticon, we're going to have lots of stuff going on at Adepticon, too. Right around the corner.
Adepticon's is just around the corner. So,
all right, well, it's time to get into the topic of the month for March. And huge thanks to Nick Brooks, who gave us the topic. What do you love about your favorite Mantic game? As this episode drops, head over to our Facebook group. You will find a fantastic post from our illustrious illustrator,
So any Meta game system, right? If you love Firefight, if you love Armada,
And if you want to do multiples, that's fine too.
I can't wait to hear what people think.
All right, well, it's been another cracking episode, and we'll see you next month. Thanks for listening, and when all else fails, do not forget to countercharge.
Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on Countercharge. Please let us know what you thought of the show by emailing us at counterchargepodcast@gmail.com, on Twitter at countercharge15, or by commenting on the Countercharge Kings of War podcast Facebook group. If you enjoy the show, you can help others find out about it by leaving positive reviews on iTunes. Until next time, keep countercharging. Music is a composition of Kevin MacLeod and is licensed under Creative Commons.
And next we got Aramis Burger. Whenever I read his name, I think of that holiday special. Was it the Burgermeister? What is that? You know what I'm talking about?
The Freezemeister. Mr. Freezemeister. Isn't that something like that?
Well, the Burgermeister's the guy that takes all the kids' toys and he like.
Oh, okay.
But it's the same. It's the same thing. It's stop motion.
And then we just got the outtakes of the show.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.